Hello there, welcome to Bryan Lomax Movie Talk and my review for Ridley Scott's 1979 classic of horror and sci-fi, Alien. I always feel a bit strange kind of reviewing a film like this, something that's regarded as such a classic, primarily because you don't really feel like there's a right lot to say on the matter that hasn't already been said. It is without doubt a classic of both those genres, horror and sci-fi. It's one of my favourite films, and this is one of my favourite franchises. But yeah, I don't know. I think anything I say in this review henceforth, you're probably going to have heard somewhere else. But for what it's worth, here is my two pennies worth. Like I say, I love it. Ridley Scott doing an absolutely blinding job on direction. Hard to believe this is only his second film as director after The Duelists itself, which itself was a very good film. But no, I love the style, the design work, the production design. It's clear from the visuals on display here that Scott did come from an advertising background. Advertising's all about the visuals, and he brings that sensibility here to this film. When you couple that with H.R. Giger's design work, then yeah, just absolute magic. The alien itself, just as a creation, still to this day hasn't really been topped. When it comes to alien life forms in movies, I don't think the xenomorph has been topped. We get this story of this crew who are almost like oil refinery type workers. It's people who do a really dirty, mucky job out in space. They're working on this refinery processing kind of station. Presumably they go to different planets, mine it or whatever. And yeah, I don't know. We're never really given all the details, just a few hints as to what they do. They're sent a broadcast to go and basically check out. They're woken up from hypersleep to go and check out this planet because there's been a distress beacon. And when they get down there, obviously one of the crew finds this bunch of eggs. A face hugger comes out of it, latches onto him, plants something inside of him, which then bursts out as this alien, which then grows up really fast, stalks the rest of the crew around the ship, and they have to kill it before it kills all of them. Very simple plot, kind of a slasher film, really. When you boil it down, it is basically a slasher film, but it's also so much more than that because of the sci-fi element. The cast of characters we get as well are really great, really believable. The way they've been directed, whether it's in the script or whether Ridley Scott just kind of had them ad-lib stuff, or I don't know, but it all feels very natural, their exchanges, particularly when they're around the dinner table and they're all talking, and they're moaning about pay and things like that. Yaphet Kotto and Harry Dean Stanton make a really good double act together. Harry Dean Stanton not really saying a right lot, Yaphet Kotto doing most of the talking, but it works. I like these two characters. Like I say, very believable. The kind of characters that if you worked with them, you could very much imagine getting annoyed with them for moaning all the time, but you'd probably still like them. You'd probably still be their friends. Tom Skerritt plays the captain of the crew, Dallas, and because he was a pretty big actor at the time, and because he's the captain, obviously, he's the character that, if you're coming to this film for the first time, not knowing anything about it, which is very doubtful at this stage, he would be the character that you would think, yeah, he's going to be the one who makes it to the end. Maybe Ripley with him. There'll be a bit of a romance thing that goes on there, and the two of them will get out in a life pod at the end, having hooked up despite all the stuff that's going on. None of that. We don't get any of that nonsense, which is great. It's awesome. There's no romantic angle. There's no love story kind of thing going on. And yeah, Skerritt turns out to not be the last man standing. He's actually one of the first to go, which is, like I say, refreshing. Even all the films that kind of ripped off Alien over the years, they've still managed to shoehorn that love interest angle in there, and I love that they don't do it here. It's just a bunch of characters who've all worked with each other for a very long time, get on each other's nerves at times, but for the most part work fairly well together. So when we get to the end of the film and these characters are all getting whittled down one by one, and eventually we realise that actually Ripley is the last woman standing, that is like refreshing. Like I say, it's different for the time. You know, I think we see a lot of films like that now, where, you know, female characters can take centre stage, but they all owe a debt to this and Terminator, I would say, but particularly Alien, because it came first, obviously. On the subject of Ripley as well, she's a great character. She really is. Now, obviously, this was a character that was written as a man, or gender neutral, I can't remember which, but I think it was meant to be written as a man, and Ridley Scott just changed it, flipped it, turned it into a woman. And because from a script standpoint, there is nothing in it to suggest what the sex might be of this character, which is a great way to approach it, because you're coming at it on terms of the character, not on terms of their gender. You know, it's got nothing to do with their gender. It's just who are they as a person? How are they going to survive in this situation? You know, Ripley she's a very by the book kind of person. She does like to stick to protocol. She's the one who won't let, or doesn't want to let, the captain and the rest of the crew back on board the ship when they've got a potential virus situation, or, you know, quarantine situation. And yet it's Ash who overrides that, the robot on the crew. So yeah, she's very by the book. She is, again, like the by the book character is kind of the one you'd expect to be killed off. So this film does a lot to kind of circumvent expectations. You know, usually the by the book character is the douchebag who's like, actually, normally we'd be rooting for what Ash did. You know, let the crew in, don't be an idiot, don't keep them outside, that's cruel, that kind of thing. But no, actually she was right to do so, and she's proven as such by the events that take place just after. Ash, for me, is the most interesting character in the film, it must be said. I think when we get into the sequels, particularly the next film, Ripley definitely becomes the most interesting. But for this film, yeah, I was always drawn to Ash because he's just such a strange character, because he's a robot, he's man-made, but he has such a fascination with this alien life form. And he's following orders because he's meant to bring this thing back, but he's also excited about it, you know, and we see that in this scene when he's jogging on the spot. He doesn't need to do that, and we only realise once we find out that he is actually a robot that scene doesn't really make much sense in that context. But he does. He's got excited, so it is a strange kind of dynamic that this machine, this non-human, so to speak, does actually feel certain emotions, does get excited, aroused even by the prospect of what's about to happen. So yeah, I like that. He's obviously got some bad wiring upstairs. He does try to kill the crew members, Ripley in particular, in order to get this thing back, in order to get the alien back to Earth. But there's one particular scene, and it's just after he's kind of been taken out, his head's kind of been lopped off, and they bring him back, they awaken him again. And it's a really interesting scene, because he's talking about how much he admires this creature that has no morality, no sense of morality. And it's like he has been programmed to basically serve whatever masters back home are giving him the orders, to do what he needs to do. So you can't help but see that kind of respect that he has for the creature, and the desire to not have a master, to not follow a master, to be unhooked, so to speak, from his human masters. So yeah, I like that, and it's a theme that Ridley Scott will follow on much later with Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And so to those people who actually really hate those films because of the whole AI angle and where Ridley Scott went with the franchise, I say look no further than the original, because it's all right here. Ridley Scott was discussing all that stuff, AI, right here in the first one. It's a really big part of the film as well. Ash is a really big part of this film. He gets a lot of screen time, and a lot of the themes and stuff that take place within the film are born out of him and his discussions with Ripley and the rest of the crew. If there is a downside to this film, I would say it's the pacing. I hate to use that word. I think people bandy that word around a lot these days, just because, yeah, a film might be slow or whatever. I think by today's standards, it probably is maybe a bit too slow. Like the opening of the film, it's 6 minutes before the pods kind of open up and people start getting out. We have this really prolonged sequence of the camera going through the ship. And I like that because it does introduce us to the ship. It makes us aware of our environment. But there is a point you get to where you're kind of like, ugh. But I just think that's, yeah, time. You know, the period in which this was made, people didn't have ADHD. You know, they didn't need like 5 cuts every second. So, yeah, I respect it. It doesn't put me off the film at all, but I could see how maybe someone from today coming at this film afresh, having never seen it, never grown up with it, you know, they might be a bit bored by it in places. But to me, as I say, I watched this film from my early teenage years, and I've always had a fondness for it, always had a respect for the craft. You know, the visuals, basically the amazing visuals. Even when it appears not much is happening, you could still pause the screen and just, yeah, take that still frame, whatever you've paused on, and it would make a beautiful piece of art. Also, if I wanted to be really nitpicky, I would say that it strikes me that no one ever seems to mention the fact that the alien itself defies all the laws of thermodynamics. The idea that it can come out of the chest as this little thing, and then the next time we see it, it is a huge man-sized alien. I don't know, unless it's been feeding off rats. I don't know, it could have been feeding off rats on the ship. That would be a jolly good explanation, but given that we don't really see it eating anyone between that, you know, between the chest bursting and then the first kill, it is a sizable amount of growth that, as I say, kind of goes against the laws of thermodynamics. Speaking of the chest burster scene, yeah, what a great sequence, must be said. There's a reason it's a classic. You know, back in the day when this came out, there were reports of people fainting in the aisles in the cinemas, and I kind of understand why. Like, not by today's standards. You know, we've seen so much of this kind of stuff now, all over, like the horror genre and whatnot. But yeah, when you look back, there weren't a right lot like this, you know, as full on as this sequence with that, you know, maybe perhaps The Exorcist. There was some stuff in The Exorcist that back then would have been quite shocking. Obviously, again, we've seen a lot of that today, a lot that's far worse than that today. But yeah, going back then, I can only think of The Exorcist before this that had something quite as graphic and twisted. But yeah, that chest burster scene, still very effective, really works, and helped once again by Veronica Cartwright's hysteria. Now, Cartwright is someone I've mentioned in previous reviews. She's that woman who, if you need a character who's very hysterical, she's the go-to woman. She's very good at working up a hysteria. I like her a lot as an actress, it must be said. But here, yeah, she's on form. And even after the chestburster sequence, when they're, you know, making plans to go after this alien, to try and track it down with their little trackers and their flamethrower, their homemade flamethrower and whatnot, the way she plays it is just spot on. You get all the different character types. You know, you got, again, Yaphet Kotto, who's willing to go after it. Let's just, you know, whatever. Ripley wanting to be sensible, want to play it safe, and then you've got her who's just, you know, you can see it in her face. She's really worked up. She's in a bit of a hysteria. She's trying to keep calm. She's trying to not let it show, but she's failing miserably. Yeah, like I say, that's what Veronica Cartwright does best, and I love her here for it. So Alien is, of course, an absolutely brilliant film. You can understand why it gets the classic status. It is definitely a 5-star film for me. A brilliant film, all about really the unknown of space. Well, not just space, but the unknown. You know, we're here, we're on this planet, and we're in a universe that kind of makes us look like a speck. Really, you know, what's out there with so much about life that is unknown, and I think it does raise those questions, and in a very scary way. But what about you? What do you think about Alien? You know, are you an older viewer who was around when it came out? Are you You know, were you born in the 90s or the 2000s? Have you seen it and you kind of think it's overrated? Which, you know, I have a few friends who were born around that period and they do think it's overrated. So yeah, like I say, what are your thoughts? Leave them below, let me know what they are. Thanks for watching, and until next time, cracking.